Back on Open Line with Dr. Richard Horwat from Bluegrass Endodontics. We were talking about your teeth, your mouth, and I know a lot of times when it comes to your teeth, you feel pain and you're wondering what's causing that pain and that kind of thing. And as we were going into the break, one of the things we were talking about, can a sinus infection cause a tooth infection? Because a lot of people connect those two.
You know, it really can't. A lot of people think that it can, but it really can't. There's something going over your sinus called a Schneiderian membrane. It's a nice gray membrane, and it actually kind of blocks it out. Patients come in all the time. They will have a sinus infection, and they are concerned that it's causing the tooth to die, and vice versa. They have a tooth infection, and they believe it's caused them to have a sinus infection. It's not the case. You know, there's a membrane covering up there. They can't communicate with each other. However, if you do have an abscessed tooth, even if you don't have symptoms, it can kind of make it so you do have symptoms if you have the sinus infection. You're having pressure against pressure, and those pressures become additive. Now, oftentimes, I think I might have done one today, as a matter of fact. It's not very common, but when I'm doing a root canal on an upper tooth, it'll look like the roots are going up into the sinus. Even if it looks like they're going into the sinus, oftentimes, you know, you're looking at a two-dimensional x-ray of something that's three-dimensional. So oftentimes that root will be either in front of the sinus or behind the sinus, but either way, even if it's going in there, there's a membrane going over there. There are times where you're doing a root canal and you're using these little tiny files, and they're like needles, and you'll actually puncture the sinus. And I'll see, especially if they have a stuffed up nose, I'll see liquids just pouring out of their tooth, and it comes down. It's a very minor thing. It usually will calm down before I'm even done with the root canal, and then it may, after we're done with the root canal, we do something called an obturation, where doing a root canal is kind of like taking lead out of a pencil. And then we take that lead chamber, we open it up, we sterilize it, and then we repack it with something else. So when I'm repacking it with something else, the glue materials may kind of go through the tip of the root just a little bit, and it may cause you to have a stuffed up nose. But sinus infections, they don't cause tooth infections. Tooth infections don't cause sinus infections. I'm sure someone can find an exception to that out there. I'm sure it's happened before, but it is a very, very rare thing, and one that really doesn't cause the other.
And that makes sense too, because you know, whether or not it's causing or not, sometimes when you just have your sinus infection and you might have a sensitive tooth or something, you connect those two because everything's so closely related. And as you're watching out there this evening too, you may be thinking, I mean, there's a lot of times where you have these questions. You have a sensitive tooth and cold touches it, a piece of ice touches it, or chocolate touches, you know, the sugar, that sort of thing, and it creates, you know, a sensation. Is that the kind of thing that you need to just monitor, and then if it continues for a week or two, that you go see the dentist, or immediately go see the dentist?
You know, that's another great question. You know, that's a good one, because we're kind of qualifying whether or not you know, to do that. You know, I think if it gets to the point where if you have a little tiny tooth infection, I don't know that you need to come, not tooth infection, I'm sorry. If you're having a little bit of sensitivity, I don't know that you need to come in for every little minor sensitivity. If it's not really affecting your quality of life and it's not a screaming pain, maybe give it a day or two and see how things go. You know, over time, your gums have a tendency to recede as well. And I know that I have this problem, and sometimes I'm brushing my teeth and I get a little twinge in my tooth, and it's really annoying. And it might even go on for a few days or a week or so, but it pretty much goes away when I'm done brushing my teeth, and it's very, very minor. You know, you should go to the dentist if you're having some type of sensitivity, but if the bottom line is if it's affecting your quality of life, maybe if it doesn't go away. I know that we have patients that come in and they have something called what I'm describing is called dentinal hypersensitivity, and oftentimes we will tell the patient to try some type of over-the-counter toothpaste that would kind of get rid of the sensitivity, a Sensodyne toothpaste, but we want them to give that a good solid month before it becomes before it really takes full effect. But there are minor things that can kind of irritate your gums. I have patients coming in too, and they say it only hurts when I eat chocolate. I've had that.
Right.
You know, and cold sensitivity and things like that. I mean, your teeth shouldn't be sensitive to cold. If the cold stimulus is strong enough to trigger the tooth and cause sensitivity, you know, I think that the main thing you want to look for is the pain lingering. When we go in and we cold test the teeth and we touch it with something freezing cold, you have what's called A delta fibers in your tooth, and they can only detect pain. Whether we touch your tooth with something hot, cold, when the nerve is triggered, the only thing your brain registers is pain. So when we're cold testing a tooth and we touch it and we do trigger the nerve, that's telling us the tooth's alive, but then it usually subsides after about 2 or 3 seconds. If the symptoms are lingering for 7, 8, 9 seconds, something's not right.
Okay.
And it's definitely, you should come in.
Something to have checked. All right, we're going back to the phones right now, and Jane is on the line with us. So, Jane, thanks for calling. Do you have a question or a comment for Dr. Horwat?
Yes, I was wondering, my husband recently went to the dentist, and they showed that there was some signs of gingivitis, and I kind of wondered if there was any, if gingivitis is kind of like a silent thing where you don't have symptoms, or, it kind of caught it early, but I didn't know if there was anything that, I needed to be watching for, in myself to see if I have any gingivitis.
Gingivitis by its definition is inflammation of the gums, and most certainly you can definitely have gingivitis and have no idea that you have it. When a patient comes in, if you're brushing your teeth and you're having any bleeding whatsoever going on in the sulcus of your tooth or your gums, then you do have gingivitis to some degree. Gums that are bleeding, they're bleeding because you're probably removing debris that's trapped underneath of them, and usually your gums will kind of shrink and tighten up. That might go on for 2 or 3 days, but if you're doing a good job, it'll usually tighten up. If your gums are still bleeding, of course, go to the general dentist and let's find out what's going on. But a lot of times, even as a general dentist, when you're doing a drive-by and you're going through all the gums and you're looking through them, there's often times where I'll see little pockets of areas where there is some inflammation down there. And when you're brushing your teeth, you want to make sure that you're massaging your gums. Only use a soft toothbrush. After I go this way and that way, and top and bottom, inside and outside, I also go up and down like this as well to try to pull any material outside of the gums as well. And it,
That's always a good point, too, though. You say use a soft toothbrush. Always use a soft toothbrush.
Always use a soft.
Why do they make medium and hard toothbrushes?
I don't know.
You always see that, rows of them.
I know, they do. And, there's times where I'll get home and I'll buy one of those 6-packs of toothbrushes because I go through them. I buy the cheapest ones I can find, and I buy a lot of them. And then when I get home and I find out that I bought a medium accidentally, it's annoying to me because it is a little bit too abrasive, I think it is. I don't really know.
I'm going to get back to you on the toothbrushes because I've got some more questions on that. But we are going back to the phone lines right now. Judy is on the line with us. So, Judy, we're glad you're here on Open Line. Do you have a question or a comment for Dr. Horwat?
Yes, a few years ago, they used to have something like, I don't know if it's a toothpaste or what, but it was in a little white plastic bottle, and you brushed your teeth with it, and it made them feel polished and smooth, to your tongue. Do they have any kind of toothpaste that kind of polishes your teeth now, like that?
I think
like you did right after a cleaning,
Okay. I think just about every toothpaste out there does some type of polishing. There may be some type of something in there that's a very, very fine abrasive in there. There's things called pumice. I know that some toothpaste companies will put a little bit of pumice in there, and what that is it's a very, very, very fine sand. And so they may be using something like that. A lot of times when you go to the general dentist and you're going your biannual cleanings, they use the type of putty that has pumice in it as well. And that's exactly what it does. It's a very, very fine type of sand that's kind of just polishing your tooth and kind of smoothing it out. Those whitening toothpastes and things like that, I think all of them have something. I don't know that the white tooth, I don't see people out there with whiter teeth per se unless they're doing whitening. I don't know that those things work, but if it motivates you to brush, then use them. But pretty much all of them will buff your tooth, at least to some degree.
Okay.
But there's no kind of particular that polishes them like.
I would recommend anything that's ADA approved. Make sure it says ADA approved, and pretty much any of them that's in any department store is going to say that. I've seen some natural ones out there. I wouldn't use them personally. I know people are pretty adamant about with regard to their philosophy on natural stuff. But every time I've ever seen anything that has some type of natural toothpaste in there or anything like that, they taste horrible. And I have tried a handful of them, and every time I'm done with them, I really...
So better stick with the mainstream brands, right?
Yeah, Crest and Colgate will be just fine.
Okay. Judy, thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you for calling in.
You got it.
Have a great evening. All right. Okay, so my question to you about the toothbrush. You said before we took this call from Judy that you will buy the cheapest toothbrushes on the market out there. So, but you go in there and you see all these different kinds of toothbrushes. You know, the ones that have like for your gums and do all kind of different things, and the bristles are different, you know, heights.
It's crazy, man.
Okay.
Some of them are $6 each, some are $9 each. I mean, I might go through at least a toothbrush every 2 or 3 weeks, a month at the longest, and I don't want to spend that kind of money on toothbrushes. Now, last time we had the show and we talked about it, I had mentioned that I buy the cheapest one out there. I only buy soft, and I just make sure I just toss it out as soon as the bristles get to the point where they don't look great anymore. And I've had a dentist, I've had more than one, say, hey, you know, they have those electric toothbrushes out there, and clinical studies have shown that you do get a better result if you do this and you do that. That's wonderful. You know, if that's true, if that's what those companies are claiming, you know, maybe they do. I don't know. I just assume use whatever motivates you to brush. If it motivates you to buy an electric one, my kids have one that plays music for 2 minutes. It makes them brush. Whatever motivates you to brush. But I buy the cheapest ones myself, and I'm happy with my results.
And so you say that even if you throw it out in 2 weeks, are the more expensive toothbrushes, do they not last longer? I mean, do the bristles not hold up more?
That's a good question. You know, I don't know. I think they last shorter. I think that a lot of times when I have one that has multiple different types of bristles on it, they don't go out at the same time. One section of bristles will kind of get crushed, and then the other ones are still there. I know there was one of them that had little tiny rubber things that were coming off the bristles with it, and I know that when I brushed with that one, it made my teeth sensitive. I hated it. But I do try some of them. There is one, I wish I can describe it. There is one that I do particularly like where it has longer bristles, shorter, longer, shorter. Those ones feel good to me. You know, they make my gums feel great. I can definitely feel those ones massaging my gums. But to be perfectly honest with you, I usually go to the pharmacy and I buy pharmacy brand, cheapest toothbrushes I can find out there, you know, Oral-B's as well. And I
so I like what you say as far as just whatever motivates you to brush.
Whatever motivates you.
But it's interesting when you start really looking at them, because since you and I've been doing this show, I will go in there and I will look at these, and you know, and some say they'll get in between certain crevices, and some, you know, are better for getting back in the, you know, far back in your mouth and that sort of thing.
Well, people have different mouths too. You know, there's different degrees of crowding that people might have in their mouths. So what works for me might not work for you. So again, the ones that have the bristles that are some longer and shorter really work really well for me, and I like them. But you know, if there's one out there that has all kinds of weird things, I've seen them where they practically have barbed wire wrapped around them. If this is working well for your mouth and you have crowding and this one's able to get that angle that the other ones can't get, then that's great. You know, whatever works for you.
So if you find one that's good. Now, on that subject, how many times a day do you think a person should reasonably brush?
Well, as a professional, you know, I'm supposed to tell you that you should brush and floss after every meal. Being practical, if you do that, then that's great. You're way, way, way ahead of the game. But definitely brush before you go to bed. It's crazy to not brush before you go to bed. You're leaving so much food and bacteria in there. Your salivary glands kind of slow down a little bit. You're not able to flush things down as much. If you're only going to brush once a day, definitely brush before you go to bed. And I would strongly encourage you to brush in the morning as well. I brush every morning and every night like it's a religion. And if you motivate your kids to do the same, and I encourage everybody, I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I'm sure that 10-year-old especially does a great job. And I tell you what, no matter how you look at it, she's still 10. And I go in there almost every time, not every time, at least a couple times a week, and I'll go in there and I'll re-show her how I want it done. And I love her to death, and I want to make sure she doesn't have any cavities. And
well, that's a good dad. Yeah, that is. All right, we are going to take a short break. When we come back, more of your calls here on Open Line at 737-7587. So come on back with us.